Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Getting the Gig, where you get tips on how to be a freelance designer, featuring Alexis Roberts, Andrew Hockrattle, Kenneth Kuh, and Evan Abrams. Now here's your host, Zach DeHovis.
Welcome everybody to Getting the Gig event. My name is Zach DeHovitz. Today I'll be hosting this event. For this event, we have four more spectacular guests with us to talk about their experience and career in the multimedia industry. First, we have Kenneth Kuh, who is a multidisciplinary designer based in Portland, Los Angeles, and Shanghai. Next, we have Alexis Roberts, a freelance photographer and graphic designer based in Atlanta, Georgia. Then we have Evan Abrams, a maker of motion graphics for hire and a teacher of Adobe Effects for all. And last and not least, we have Andrew Hockrattle, a brand identity designer that uses his unique perspective to create visual systems and that are sustainable, innovative, and engaging. Thank you all for coming. And again, welcome. Let's get started. So our first question for today will be, tell us your current role and the company you work for.
Hey, I'm Kenny, and I'm currently a brand/digital product designer at Nike.
Well, I am Alexis, like you said before. So I like to say that I'm a product photographer by night and graphic designer by day. I currently, one of my biggest clients right now is iPonder, which is a media source for a community of journalists who just want to tell really great stories. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Evan Abrams. I work freelance. So in a sense, I work for myself, but I also work for, I guess, many people in that regard. So I work for production companies, agencies, often for end clients like FedEx, Hewlett-Packard, kind of large corporate things. Not as artistic or exciting as some things. However, I will say that it's very stable and pretty normal is kind of stuff that I do. But I like to think of myself as a real normie, so it kind of works out.
On the other side of that, I am a chaotic energy, and I like to call myself a creative for hire. I do a little bit of whatever. As long as it's creative, I'll do it, anywhere from brand identity design to production work, to on-camera education, to campaigns, whatever it is, I'll do it. I just love building worlds and telling stories.
Awesome. So our second question is, how did you go about building your own brand presence?
Like how did I start?
Yes.
So I guess everything started from Behance. That's the first platform that I got to share my portfolio on, and I guess my initial intention was really to just get more exposure, so in that way I could get more like internship opportunities or freelance. And from there, I got the Behance badges, and that really made me feel like the importance of having an exposure online, since a lot of times, even if you send emails to clients or companies that you want to work for, they don't really reply. But as soon as you start having that exposure, then it really makes a difference. So I started also applying to different awards, TDC, ADCs, and as well as building my personal website. So yeah, I guess that really made a difference.
Alexis, unmute your mic, please.
Sorry.
You're okay. Don't worry about it.
Didn't even see that. Yeah, so I would say it's all about what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so making connections and relations with people and just having them, know who I am kind of helped getting a lot of gigs. Also, another thing is Instagram, posting as much as I wanted to, showing off whatever, didn't care how bad it was. At one point, I was like, I'm just going to put it out there and let the world know who I am. And then I'm going to show you what I do. And sometimes I call the ghetto and I'm like, this is my ghetto way of doing it. But then when you see the results, it's going to be great. So that was my way of kind of like showing who I was and, how I like to present my work. And then, then people like saw that and was like, I like to work with you because you seem fun. So yeah.
I don't know. I feel now that I'm too banal for this group. When I started out, my early jobs were in government here in fabulous Ottawa, Canada. So you don't really get a lot of outside exposure doing that. You kind of stay in your own lane. So I started a YouTube channel early on back in the day. I thought, what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell people, how to do the stuff that I'm doing. Kind of inadvertently positioned myself as I guess an authority on the subject. So then suddenly, like art directors and stuff were sending me emails like, "Hey, how do I do this? You know what? Just you do it. Don't tell me how to do it. Just you do it." And that's kind of how it went from there. Now, I'm not going to recommend that as a strategy for people, just because at a certain point, if you keep kind of teaching and stuff, people tend to kind of think that you don't really do the thing. So I've found some people are actually shocked when like, you still do client work? Yeah, every day. It's crazy. So I've almost kind of shot myself in the foot with my branding. It's kind of been a bit of an oopsie, I think, but it's fine. It's it is what it is. The career is what you're doing, I suppose. But that's what I'll say on that part.
For me, I actually have a banner hanging right behind the camera that just says "Had to be you," and I bought it when I left working in-house. I left agency and was like, I'm going freelance. I'm doing it. I'm jumping off the cliff on my own. And from there, I think I had this realization that my brand was like 60% personality and 40% work. And I've always wanted it to be like 90% my work, that I'm like, just like love everything I do. And once I realized that like, oh, I think that a lot of it is people like my personality and engaging with me and share the work, I put my effort into it and share it. But if I just lean into my strengths, that's going to be my brand. And that's kind of how I've built that and kind of foster that into, it's just me. And that's what I like to do. And it's so much more comfortable to do that than to try to like fake your way into the perfect portfolio.
Awesome. So our next question will be, what software or skills do you find yourself using most of the time for your work?
Nowadays, I work a lot with branding and motion graphics. So I would say, of course, Figma for UI UX design, and Adobe After Effects and Design Illustrator for all the motion branding works.
Unmuting myself. I would call myself a Photoshop queen, self-proclaimed. I've been in Photoshop since I was like 15, so doing little flyers here and there. But now that's where I usually do a lot of my editing, photos and things like that. And then also for graphic design, sometimes I'm dabbling in Canva, whatever gets it done. And then just a couple of other little things here and there, like apps on my phone and things like that. But other than that, that's pretty much where I stay.
Man, I'll say that I think for me, I do a lot of motion design work. So I'm in the Adobe ecosystem. My daily driver is After Effects. That's where a lot of the parts come together, I'll say. Since it's like at its heart, it's a compositor. So we're often we've got Cinema 4D elements, they're coming in, and a lot of assets made in Illustrator, those are coming in, and it's from all over the place. But After Effects is kind of where that's kind of the nexus for me. But in terms of just software in general, if I could give this piece of advice to anybody, it's you have to kind of find what works not only for the way you work, but also you kind of have to be a little bit agnostic with it, that the tools are going to flex, things are going to change over time. I'm old enough to remember when Adobe wasn't on subscription. I know that bounced a lot of people. And if that's not something that works with the way you work, then, you're going to have to find alternatives. And being flexible, though, if you pigeonhole yourself into being technologically based and that technology goes out of vogue, that could be an oopsie. But anyway, that's where I'm at.
I agree with that sentiment. I always tell students, especially when they're saying like, oh man, I'm proficient in Photoshop and Illustrator. There's an equivalent of that. That's kind of like, even when I say it, that I'm like, it's almost like a carpenter being like, I'm proficient in hammer. And you're like, well, yeah, that's probably a good idea. But like, can you build me a house? And this is a good smattering because I spend most of my time in InDesign. I teach a lot of Illustrator, do a lot of branding design a lot of brand design in Illustrator. Then I spend most of my time in InDesign doing layouts, doing data flows, doing production work. I do the majority of my work is the non-glamorous production stuff that I do in secret at night. But when I'm streaming or posting case studies, it's branding, Illustrator, look at this. And then I have a scanner over on my desktop, which is the other piece that I use all the time.
Right on. Of course, nobody wants people, working with them who's like a master of Nokia cell phones or whatever. All right, next question. How do you manage a work-play balance?
I guess I just don't. I don't really have a work-life balance. I think for me, a lot of my like work time just bleeds into my playtime or lifetime because I just like design. So even when I'm like not doing my full-time job, I'm still trying to look for like freelance or part-time to still be able to like do something more creative because working for a corporate really has a lot of like boundaries, like boxing your creativity in. So a way for myself to like try to find stuff to play with is just to find like experimental projects to work on. So in that sense, I guess I don't have a work-life balance.
I think it helps to have a partner, a significant other, because then you have to have a work-life balance because it's not work all the time. But I would say that I try to schedule in like things that I like to do for myself, which is like a self-care day, or just like try to come away from the computer for a while. Maybe I'll do my little hula hoop or something, read a book or whatever. I try to like find, especially on weekends, like I still do that whole thinking of 9 to 5 kind of thing, even though I work for myself. But I still try to find that time for myself to do things outside. So that also creates inspiration for things that I do on my personal projects and all of that, because life outside does inspire, your creativity. So a lot of that, I just try to manage that to, keep thinking of that when I do try to balance life and play.
I think that's such a good point that like without outside inspiration, outside influence, you can really get stuck in like a microcosm of just whatever is trendy in design. Like personally, a lot of this stuff for me comes down to like what gives you energy and then what takes energy. So I'm a pretty introverted person, so taking a lot of meetings just takes the energy from my body. And designing, doing something isolated and solo kind of raises my energy. So there's a lot of like level balancing. It's like I'm playing The Sims over here every day. But for me, I'm 34 now. My body is starting to deteriorate rapidly. So I'm at a standing desk trying to keep the blood moving. Got to work in exercise throughout the day. You have to keep things regulated, I'll say, because you can start to become quite hunched, and it's very painful for the long term. But I don't know, in terms of things that I do to try to seek that balance, I've always been really into martial arts. I can't wait for normal activities to resume so I can get back out there and fight strangers. That sounds really weird, but that is something that really just activates different parts of my brain in different ways, and I think lets the other parts of the brain rest, because our mind is the tool that does the thing, and if it's wrung right out, that's no good. So gotta activate different parts sometimes.
For me, I have small routines and then like big escapes. And so like I get the mail every single day at 6:30, like regardless of if I'm working in the middle of a project, I'm like, oh, it's mail time. And for me, that's just like the mental stop for the day that I'm like, oh, I have a thing that I have to do that isn't just sitting in front of my computer, and I walk and get the mail, and maybe I go right back to work, or like, oh man, I'm going to make dinner now or whatever. And then I also like go super hard, just working very intensely. But then when I like relax, I relax very hard and very intensely. And literally like after this meeting, I'm driving to wine country and I'm going hot air ballooning this weekend. And so any time that I'm like, I have 3 days, like literally nothing's getting booked, and I'm going so hard in those 3 days, and then we're back to insane work.
Those sound like really effective. So our next question is, was there anything that inspired you to pursue your job/career?
For me, it's just books. Like I like to read books as well as just collect books. As you can see in the back. And I think when I first went to my art school, I went in as an illustration major. Like I didn't really know what design or graphic design was. And I remember taking this class called Design 2, and then this kid came in with like an After Effects project, like a motion study. And now looking back, it's like really easy. It's just like keyframes with like motion curves and stuff. But for me, that really blew my mind, because like I never knew animating something could be so easy, and that kind of opened the door for me to want to challenge myself to not only make something static on the canvas, but also think dimensionally and then put everything into motion. So yeah, that was my starting point, and that really inspired my later career trajectory.
For myself, I was in college and I was majoring in communication, and I said, what am I going to be doing after this? And I thought about all the things I really like to do. And I said, well, I really love to do photography and graphic design. I've been doing it so long, but only for fun, and maybe like $10 flyers. But at the time I was taking a photography class, and just to kind of like brush up on things that I didn't know just off of self-taught. So I was trying to figure out what I could do in that field and what kind of photography I can do, what other things, that photography consists of. And I realized that I really love putting things together. Like I really love putting like a creative direction together. I really love seeing something come alive from something that literally from nothing, and that I created it. So I looked up, I researched how many creative directors that look like me, how many Black women are actually hired to do creative direction or marketing directors or anything like that. How many Black women are in, just advertising, period. And, I realized there's a very small percentage. And I think the time that I actually looked it up, it was like 3%. And so that's what inspired me, because I realized that I was needed, that the way that I creative direct is what is what's needed. The way that I create, the way that I do anything was needed, and I like to call myself Jill of all trades. I love doing, photography and graphic design. So I never, I never saw myself being niched down so much, but like, I think that's what really inspired me. I realized that I can use my creative abilities for a lot more than what I thought. So yeah, that's what inspired me. And I wanted to help small businesses. So
Oh man, heck yeah. I love that. Like I know when I looked at people who were doing jobs, like, oh well, there's a bunch of white dudes here. This must be the job that white dudes do. It's, but I love that, you saw the space and you're like, I am needed here, because you are like, we need more women in the field. We need more black women in the field. Like, it's crazy. Anyway, so for me though, I was inspired to kind of pursue this career path. I wanted to be in advertising since I was a child, because I'm a weird child. And like, when I was watching cartoons, it was like, oh man, these things that happen in between the cartoons, they're amazing. And I was like, I want to make some of those. Maybe, is there a job to do that? And I had no idea, because I was a child. And, you know, my parents were both artistic hippies. My dad sold stained glass windows for a while. My mom made pottery. And, you know, those didn't turn into viable careers for them. And because that fine art is hard, right? And so they were like, you know what you're going to do when you go to school, Evan? Not that. So I ended up in a communication program in business studies. And I was like, I'm going to get into marketing. That's going to be great. And I just ended up in a practical co-op doing the labor of design stuff. And, you know, here's some copy. Go animate that. We got to make some promos. It's like, you know what, doing it actually is fun. So I ended up not going into management roles or into higher level strategy things, because it was so much fun doing the job, which I would not have known if I never took that co-op job, if I never experienced what it was like. Maybe there's a different universe where I went on a different path, right? And that's, a balder, thicker Don Draper, having his Mad Men life in a different universe. But I'll say that if you don't try the things, you'll never know if you want to do them. So, that's the only recommendation I can kind of make on that if you feel an urge towards something, you got to jump on it. Because we're in this universe where you live, so you got to stick with those things.
First of all, shout out to Hank Washington. I see him in chat. If y'all don't follow Hank, he's an amazing illustrator. But for me, my thing was Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. I was like the weird kid in high school that like people just made fun of, didn't really fit in anywhere. And I remember watching Nightmare Before Christmas and just thinking like everything here is wrong. Like everything is so wrong and mixed up, and like Christmas doesn't go with Halloween, but somehow like it's happening. And then came to this like realization that Tim Burton had like set a context for how I would experience his world. And I just fell in love with that idea of like creating a world and asking everyone to like pause on their reality and to step into yours and to give them this new perspective and then let them go back out in the world. And so I fell in love with that idea, and then eventually went to school and started out as a theater major. And I was like, oh man, I love telling stories. I love like living in imaginary worlds. And then realized that I didn't really want to live in them. I wanted to kind of create them. And so I switched to be an English major. And so I was an English major, and I was like, I'll be a poet and I'll write stories. And then realized that I could communicate more effectively in a visual medium than I could in a written medium. And so switched over to design and kind of found my passion there. And realized that I love making and building those worlds. And it was the perfect pairing of that escapism that I felt when I watched Night Before Christmas. Now I could do that and provide that for other people, and hopefully they could have that similar aha kind of experience.
That's really great. So our next question would be, if you were hiring someone, what would be the star qualities you would be looking for in a candidate?
I guess the ability to communicate with the team, because I think it's easy to teach a person how to design or how to use the tools, the software well, but then a lot of people who are good at design can't really communicate their ideas or get their thoughts across really well. A lot of times when, especially working at the corporate or even a studio on the project, you're working with your art director, creative director, other junior designers. It's not just you leading the project, it's you like doing only a small chunk of the work. And at that moment, it's really important to communicate your idea well, to let other knows what you're trying to do, what works, what doesn't work. So in that way, you can really push the project forward.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kenneth. Like, one of the things is definitely communication. Like, without a doubt, that's really it can be a really hard thing to do, to express yourself and try to figure out, exactly what you want from a person or how to describe the design you want. So definitely, or just anything in that nature. I would also say consistency, and being able to basically, I would say how I would go about it, which is nothing to something, this that would be like a star quality, I guess, qualification for me is more of like, you use what you had and you literally made magic with it. So I would definitely say that. Yeah, I learned how to pitch yourself. Like, learning how to pitch yourself is really, 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 really good. So talking really great about yourself too.
It's interesting. Like, I don't have to hire people often, I'll say. So I'm maybe not always thinking about people in these terms, but for me, when I'm looking for someone that I'm gonna bring onto a project I'm gonna work with, um, accountability is a big thing. People who do what they say and say what they do. Um, and part of that though is having a good understanding of yourself and your own limitations. So I'd rather someone come in who is very self-knowledgeable and also knows when to ask for help. Like that's a critical feature. Like if I bring someone on and they say, absolutely, I can run fluid simulations all day long. I love it. And then, 2 hours later, it's like, so how's that simulation going? Oh, turns out I didn't actually know how to do that. Like that's not good. If you don't understand your own capacities and have the kind of humbleness to say like, you know what, this I can't do, but you know what, I can find out, right? Like you don't have to have all the answers. I prefer someone who can be comfortable saying, I don't know, but we're going to find out, right? Someone who is willing to explore and is constantly curious in those ways. So that to me is a big quality to have in someone. And likewise, that also means that if they're going to be brought on in a permanent capacity, it's like, well, our shop is thinking about exploring VR. Does anybody know about that? Someone who's like, I don't, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to go become an expert in that. Like people who are hungry to absorb new knowledge, I think is really rare and something that is critical if you're going to have staying power at an organization and just in your own career, I'll say. So hungry curiosity and optimism is great. And yeah, that's everything else. I think you can be taught. I think anything else can be trained. It's because as maybe I'm biased because I spent a little bit of time working for the Army, and they take the idea that anyone can do anything with enough time and training and yelling. You'll eventually be able to do anything. And I think if you bring the right attitude and that feeling to it, that's what we want.
For me, I think I'm looking for perspective. Like I want to know how they see the world more than anything. Because to me, that helps inform the decisions that they're going to make, and kind of the fights that we'll have and the ideas that we'll ideate. Because I want somebody that has a strong and interesting perspective. I think there are a lot of times that you need to be the chameleon that's just like, do you know how to do this? Great, do it. But then I want someone who can do that, but also has a perspective, that has a voice that says, what if we did it this way? Or what if we tried this other thing? That to me is much more interesting and desirable. And then I also want someone with ideas. I like to understand how you think and that you have ideas. Because for me, like a good idea with a bad application is still a good idea. And we're like, we can polish that to filth. That's fine. But if you have a bad idea and you try to polish it, like it's still going to be a turd idea. It's just like a shiny turd. And so it's really about, can you think, do you have ideas, and do you have a perspective behind those ideas that's going to be at least interesting, or can you convince me that it's interesting?
Sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points. So next one is, what do you think is the best way to make connections within your industry?
The best way to make connections, I think LinkedIn is the most obvious way for me. Um, just go into LinkedIn and then add people or send a message to them. But also, I think just from working with different people from different opportunities can really help you build out a connection or a network. From my own experience, like I was freelancing on a team at Facebook last year. And then from there, I mean, before that, there was a studio in New York that I really, really wanted to get into. I was like spamming them email almost every week, but just no response. But then towards the end of my freelance period contract with Facebook, one of the designers on the team was like, "Oh, hey, I happen to know the partner of that studio. Do you guys want to connect?" So I think sometimes just treating every opportunity equally, and then just try to do your best on it, and then who knows, like some dots might connect, and then you get to really expand your connection from there.
Yeah, so I think I can break it down maybe like in three things, but um, definitely use the people around you, the network that you already have. Tell people, tell everyone that you can do something. Tell them what you can do and how good you're at it, and then show them. You just never know who in your circle already needs you, or someone outside of that circle. So friends of a friend of a friend. Creating those relationships are very important, especially people who make decisions, big decisions, in big companies and things like that. So I would definitely say that's the first thing to do is just utilize who's around you. And then second, I would say social media. Kenneth mentioned LinkedIn. Also, I've gotten a lot of leads from Instagram. Just being besties with people on Instagram, going and liking their stuff. Hey, like I noticed you're a product photographer. I am, so that definitely helps in building those relationships as far as on social media. And I would say the referrals that you get from clients, definitely with clients that you have, just make sure to have a really good relationship with them, because then they'll refer you to more people. And so as long as you have, foster those relationships and make sure that they're in good condition, you'll stay hired.
And yeah, I think like word of mouth is so important, because in some ways you do kind of live and die by your reputation, from person to person. Like it's wild. So much of the work I end up doing is oh, I know someone that you worked for, because at a certain level, a lot of people talk to each other is an interesting phenomenon. And but when we're talking about, how to network, how to meet people, how to kind of grow those connections, there are a few forms of connection that, if we're thinking about what kind of connection is valuable to me, right? Connections to clients, that's okay. That's great. That's the thing that you need to create income, right? And if that's the case, then if you want to meet them, you have to think the way they do, and you have to go to the places they are. And, if you are looking for B2B stuff, LinkedIn, that's where a lot of people who are in marketing are at, right? That's where a lot of people who are in that space are. But I think don't undervalue the connections to your peers. You're in class with a lot of people who are going through the same struggles that you're going through. You're on a kind of a journey, you're on parallel paths together. The networking and relationships with people who are going through the same stuff is still super valuable. And I think there's so many kind of resources and stuff that one person can't pull it all in themselves. But if you are connected to a community around you of designers, of creatives, that really fuels the way you think about your career, the way you think about opportunities, and I think is very healthy to have really strong connections around, rather than connections vertical always, right? Because if the only people you talk to are clients, nobody else around you, that is a lonely kind of solitary life, I'll say. But yeah, I mean, if we want to get into how to network with clients and stuff, I say go to the people who have constant need. That's why I go to agencies, production companies, people who are constantly serving end clients and have a constant flow of work, as opposed to going direct to client who have finite amount of work. They only launch so many campaigns during a year, so you probably won't talk to them that often. But relationships with producers eventually leave a place and go to another place. Now you're known at two places, right? That's the nature of a long-term career that you are hopefully doing for decades in the future. So, thinking long-term in those ways. So yeah, that's me on networks, I suppose.
For me, I'm stealing advice that someone told me. Amy and Jen Hood, two incredible designers, once told me, they're like, put yourself in rooms you don't belong in. And I was like, that's the greatest advice I've ever heard. And that's gotten me to so many connections and friends and jobs and, movements in career, is seeing that opportunity and just being like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Like, I probably shouldn't be here, but like, let's see what happens. Right. And I think there's an idea behind that like, there's almost this like dirtiness associated with like social climbing. But I think that there's like, social climbing obviously isn't good, but like, if you see a ladder, climb it. Like, don't try to avoid those opportunities and invest authentically in community. And it's almost like the community will help you find those ladders and like give you the boost to like start going up. And it just becomes this never ending like mosh of people, like zombie World War Z, where people are kind of like pushing each other up and it's like, okay, now you go. Okay, now you go. And we just create this like person tower into new heights. And it really is just invest and support the community, and that investment pays off with interest in the long run. But you really want to make friends and not connections, like really invest and actually want to get to know people.
Freaking out. Dope, dude. That's great advice. Our next question, before we get on to that, we're going to ask a few more questions, and then after that, we're going to go to the Q&A section of the panel of the event. But before now, let's get on to the next question, which is any resume advice / tips for putting together a great resume when you get out of college?
I just graduated last year, December, so I remember working on the resume, and I think it's the attention to details. Like, we literally had a class where the teacher taught us how to like form our resume, and I never thought like resume could be so difficult to try to like articulate. And most of the rules I already forgot, but then I remember like you had to go into you had to watch out for the rag of your paragraphs. You have to typeset it. You have to make sure there's a system to it, like every first letter is capitalized or not, stuff like that. And on a broader stroke, I think on your resume, you just have to be yourself. Like, don't try to don't try to brag about something, but also like just stay true to who you are. And then if you lack experience, then just be honest about it, and then never going into an interview trying to tell the person that you can do this, you can do that, but then when you show up on the first day of your job, like that's when the difference happens.
Yeah, I would say that, so I'm thinking of my own experience because when I got out of college, I said I wanted to work for someone, and I wanted to work for an agency, an advertising agency, and I wanted to work for the biggest one. And I didn't have no experience, and I had experience, but I didn't have enough. And then I didn't have a portfolio to show anything, right? So I would say definitely invest in a portfolio if you're a graphic designer and photographer, or brand designer, however, in that field, I would definitely say make sure your portfolio shows what you want to do, not just everything you can do and the best of what you can do. That way you get hired for that more often. Resumes, there's so many, things out there. If you want to apply for a job, that's one thing. Decide whether or not you want to apply for a job or do you want to work for yourself, because that's going to be two different things. I realize that working for myself, all I need to have is a portfolio that's going to be banging with a bunch of bomb pictures and everything that I can do. And you see that and you're like, okay, I'm gonna hire her. But if I'm applying for a job and resume things, definitely make sure, if you're going the resume option, the traditional option, I would definitely say make sure that you put a lot of your accomplishments, what you've done with whatever company you work with or internship that you work with or however, but also put what's relevant, right, of what you really want to do, and definitely do your research before you go and apply anywhere. Do your research. Don't just apply. Please do your research and what they're looking for. But definitely I would say decide first whether or not you want to work for yourself or do you want to work for someone, and then you'll know which way you have to go as far as resume or portfolio. That's the way I'm going to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, as great as a resume is, one piece of paper doesn't tell us enough about what you can do. So you got to see the work. So for some people, that's a portfolio. For people in motion design, that's a reel. Reels are critical, hypercritical. So those are kind of the things you're going to send off to people. Resumes in general, I find that some people put too much into them. Don't over embellish what's up. Don't use $10 words. Use simple language, simplest language possible. And if you haven't done much, say what you want, say what you can do, say what you will bring to the table. Don't make up stuff that you have done in the past, or even more critically, don't embellish things, because you can trick no one. At a hiring level, I've seen it all. If you're coming in, you've got no years experience under your belt. You say you've been leading stuff and coordinating, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh yeah, cool. So you say, right? Like it's hard to back stuff up, right? So try to focus on what is actionable in there, and try to be aware that your resume will be sitting next to a whole bunch of almost identical pieces of paper. So if you are using bone stock phrases, then that's gonna be the same. It's like, yeah, I've seen this person. I saw them 5 pages ago, and they all went in the bin. Hiring is rough like that, so you got to be able to capture someone's interest right off the jump. And I think part of that is being very clear, be very concise, but your work also has to speak for itself. So you can't artist statement your way out of this one. You got to show some work. So that's my hard rule on that one. But I don't know. I'm not sure if the resume, because it doesn't tell the complete story. Just remember that it is a design asset. It is a marketing tool to promote the most valuable thing, hopefully in your world, you, and the skills that you are bringing to someone else. So it's an advertisement for you. Sell the heck out of yourself. So.
Yeah, for me, by the time I'm done looking at your resume and your portfolio, I want to be able to answer 2 questions about you. I want to be able to answer, what do you want to say and how are you going to say it? And I don't want you to tell me those things. I want to look at your stuff and be like, cool, I got my answers. I totally understand you. Got it. Let's go. And yeah, I agree with everything else that everyone has said. But then the one thing, okay, this is my one thing. This is such a hot take, but it's my one thing. If you have a graph or charts or stars with programs next to it, hold on, I need to get close up. I'm going to find you and I'll look you dead in the eyes and I'll just be like, I'm disappointed. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Don't have charts. Don't have charts in your resumes, please. We just need to assume that you understand those programs and that you're good at them. I don't need you to tell me, show me. That's all. Hot take off my soapbox.
That's very intimidating.
Blame them.
All right. So moving on to the Q&A portion. Someone asks, can you tell us about a time where you faced a challenge within your work and how did you get around it?
Challenge at work. Um, I guess most of the times, I have challenge in my work in terms of like my own motivation. Like I lose motivation in doing some kind of project after it being dragged on for like 3 to 4 months. I sort of had to find ways to pick my like pace back up, and I find it helpful for me to just try to start a personal project or look for other freelance opportunities where you get to hop on something more fun or just, I guess, change flavors. So when you go back to the project you've been working on, you can look at it from a different perspective or from a more fresh point of views.
Um, I think I had to recall a time that I became a social media manager. It was the first job I had as a social media manager. I didn't know what I was doing. But the one thing I knew that I was very creative. So I said, I could do graphic design, I could do photography. So we're just gonna make this up as I go. I didn't know how statistics work. I didn't know how the whole analytics, anything. I was just like, I know how to create stuff. So let's just create stuff. It was a very challenging job, but it did bring out a lot of creativity out of me, and also ignited what I wanted to do. It showed me exactly what I wanted to do. So sometimes taking those opportunities, it does show you, especially those challenging opportunities. It shows you exactly what you want to do, because then you're like, okay, I can pick a piece apart exactly what involves this job, and then figure out exactly from that piece that I really want to do. And from that job, like, I didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't give me a lot of money to like create things. It was a jewelry store. So they didn't have a lot of things for me to even take pictures with the jewelry. So I just took knickknacks here and there and was like, okay, you guys got stones. Okay, you got string. I got a little pamphlet thing over here. Let me just grab that, put that in there. Okay, we've got plastic. Put it in there too. So I did some unconventional things, but which I thought was like, oh, I'm not a professional. But as soon as I posted pictures about it, and things were like, oh my gosh, like, how did you do this? What is this? Well, if you only seen the behind the scenes. But using what you have is, I mean, you don't have to have all the fancy things, right? Like, that's the most challenging thing. People feel like you have to have the most expensive light, the most expensive camera, the most expensive everything. But if you just use what you have and build from there, it can be magical. The journey is really what you want to be on. That's really what it is. That's the journey that it takes you on. It's those challenges. You have to face those challenges, right? Because that's part of the journey of being creative. Like, it'll never just be smooth and easy. But yeah, that's my take on challenges.
Man, the process is the job, and I think gotta embrace that process. For me, if I didn't love the challenge of it, I wouldn't do it. If I only liked the result, I wouldn't be here, because we have beautiful results one time out of 100, maybe, because the rest of it is the process work that gets thrown out along the way. Whenever I face challenges, adversity, I come back to the problem methodology. It's what NASA does to get things on the moon or whatever. And this idea that return to the problem, work the problem, continue iterating. You're not going to get struck by lightning. Stuff isn't going to like, maybe you'll have a breakthrough or something, but these breakthroughs happen when you work the problem. And I always say, if your way becomes confused, return to the original, return to the impetus. Why are we doing this, right? What is the core? So if the project is getting muddied and mired and stuff, hold on, let's take it back. What is the core? What are we actually trying to accomplish? Let's drive towards that. From a technical angle, though, if it's questions of execution, how are we going to do this? Then it's just about mustering resources or seeing it from a different angle or trying to apply a different methodology. You can't just drive at things linearly. You want to start at the core, figure out how we might get there, start rejecting bad paths early, and eventually you arrive at a good way forward. There's so many ways to arrive at anything. Knowing which way we might take to get there is a big part of the challenge. And some of the ways are not going to work out along the way, and we're going to have to go back and maybe start over. But by trying to get to the fullest completion of the idea, as quickly and as with as fewer hours as possible, maybe it's because I come from that marketing business sense that we want the minimum viable product so we can tell if we want to develop that more and more. That's the methodology that I try to deploy so that I don't end up kind of in a linear rut. If that makes sense.
For me, I almost get excited when I'm stuck now, or like when something sucks. I realized in case studies a little while ago that like you have to show the process at the beginning, because you have to tell the audience that it sucks before you show them that it's good. And it like showing them the bad stuff makes the good stuff look better. And so I love when I get stuck, because it's that equivalent of like, that you're going to like have s'mores eventually, but right now there's just like dead smoke, like on a bunch of leaves. And you're like, okay, cool. Like the thing's going to happen. I just have to keep like blowing on it, or like put more fire on it or whatever. And I love the anticipation of that now, that it's like, oh, I'm stuck now. I know eventually I won't be stuck. So let's like love the stuck zone and make sure that like we're documenting and like figuring out what's going wrong, and just like trying to power through and be like, all right, let's stay stuck and let's make this like suck as bad as it can, because then there's no going down from that, and then work your way back up, right? That it's like, okay, cool. Let's explore the worst viable concept. Let's spend some time there, and that's obviously not it. So what is it? And then just keep asking yourself that question. So yes, I love that. And yes, somebody in chat says success, but like with S-U-C-K, cess. I love that. Success. I love that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. Our next question is this one's for Kenneth. Any advice for someone that wants to find their own style?
Find your own style. I guess you have to, it's almost like painting. You just have to start from, I don't want to say copying, but like studying like what works. Like for me, my starting point was I was really drawn into like most of the art school students, like the minimalism from like Japanese aesthetic, like everything's really clean, really white. So that was my starting point. And I would also say that before you have like a solid foundations of design thinking and skills, you wouldn't be able to form your own style. So for me, I started from like the minimalism style, and then if you look at my work nowadays, I don't like, you wouldn't call it minimal at all. So it's really in the process that you're kind of like trying to master different skills from different like work, I guess. Like a lot of times I would scroll through Instagram and I would see something like, let's say like a kinetic type motion graphics, and I'll be like, oh, maybe I can do that, and I'll try to replicate it in After Effects. And after I get that skill down, then I would start thinking about how to digest that and turn that into my own language. So I wouldn't rush for a personal style at first. I think just take your time and then absorb or get inspired from whatever you like. Follow artists, designers that you admire on Instagram, learn from them, and then don't be afraid to just try to do what like the style that they're already doing. And then after you get everything down, then you can try to implement that and then develop your own style.
Gotcha. So our next question, this is for everyone, and it's a real classic question. How do you see the design space in the next 5 years?
This is my like immediate hot take on this. Sorry, I'm just jumping in. I don't think logos will matter in 5 years. Like, I think logos, I know, right? Shocking. I don't think logos will matter anymore. I think that it's all about like visual languages, and building out pieces and values. Cause I think that audiences, and especially our generation that's coming up, pays more attention to values than aesthetics. And so I think being able to like communicate those values, create a visual language that people can understand and communicate with, like, I think that will be the future, to where the logo like just becomes obsolete. It's about the bits and pieces of visual language that go together to make it feel like that thing. But it's like, we don't need a logo on this. If it's green, it's Starbucks. Like that, I think it will move further in that zone. And so sorry, logo designers, adapt.
I love that. If I could just jump in it and kind of build off of that, it's really interesting to see that evolution actually starting to happen, right? As we're moving into this mode. I'm trying to think, like, there was this product that I picked up, it was like Magic Spoon cereal, right? No matter where you see this box in the world, you're like, I know exactly what that is. I know who this is, and I know what they're about. Like, we throw around the word vibes, right? It's all about vibes. Well, it kind of is like that. To create visuals that evoke emotion, that's what we're doing. And I think it's getting very refined because it pervades so many different levels of experience. So the website, the app, the social media presence, the in-store experience, and eventually the augmented reality overlays that will live on your eyeballs. I don't know. But the point is, all of these layers, right, as it blends between what is something you go and find and something that comes to you, that kind of, we need to get people to select to come to things, right? If we're not drawing people in with mystery, with whatever it is that pulls attention to the space, that's going to be really important. Because I think the days of being able to like push things out to people is kind of going away as well. That's much harder because people self-select to reject messages that are coming at them. So, oh, what is an email? Gross. Away. I choose to see this in my feed. Yum, yum, yum. So that shift in mentality, pulling instead of pushing, is what I think we'll see a lot more of.
I definitely agree with Andrew and Evan that a lot of it will go a lot into aesthetics, but I also, one big question would be like, do I see myself wearing this, or do I see myself being here? Do I see myself, that it's going to probably be the question that continues on, is how do I put my audience, or how do I put my my customers here without being here, right? Or without being in the picture. I believe inclusiveness is going to be, if that's a word, inclusivity, I think. Diversity is going to be a big thing, and I think it's already happening. And I think it's going to be an explosion of it, of going further, and it's going to be more tapping into culture. I believe that, a lot of these advertising agencies and things like that, they're going to have to hire more of these, freelancers outside of just who's in their actual network, to get different perspectives on things, because of the diversity that we need in inclusion. There you go. Inclusion that we need in, advertisement and things of that nature. So I definitely see it on the journey to more culture, more diversity, just being more inclusive to everyone. So yeah, that's something to think about.
I think design in the near future will the boundary between like physical and the virtual world will start disappearing. Like if you look at the NFT arts that's rising these days, like I think that's a perfect example, as well as like VR, AR. Almost all the companies are trying to like come up with something that's digital, and with COVID going on, that's only gonna fast forward the whole progress. Like everything's gonna be in the digital market. Yeah, like it's also a thing where like I think editorial design will start going downhill in the near future, because just Gen Zs nowadays, like everything is on Instagram. Like if you want to read something, you go to ebook. So there's going to be like less paper and a lot more technology, digital involved. And one thing I regret not studying harder back at school is UI UX design, since I think that's like the hottest design field right now in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you guys. That was all. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. Thank you guys so much for coming and taking the time to be here. It's meant a lot. This has been great. And for our audience, thank you all for coming. We also couldn't have done this without you guys. This was our last Getting the Gig for the semester, and hopefully we will keep doing this in the fall. So again, thank you guys so much, and you guys have a wonderful summer. And take care. Peace.
Bye.